It is fluid that gets into the interstitial space from the capillaries, and then if it is not contained, it will move on to the alveoli. And if it's still not contained, it will continue to move up through the bronchioles and up into the larger bronchi. And that's the point where the patient is going to start coughing up that frothy pink secretion. The pink is going to come from the capillary kind of destruction, not true destruction, but damage, I should say. So what else do you know about pulmonary edema? Anything?
Well, I learned a fun fact yesterday that when a person dies, they have pulmonary edema, you can actually bring it out of their lungs.
Interesting.
Where'd you learn that at?
I saw it on a documentary. Autopsy documentary.
Great job.
So at that
Go be a pathologist.
point, obviously the patient died, the fluid had overwhelmed all of the alveoli and was up into the airways. And the fluid was such that it was still in the alveoli. Okay, so this is Des Jardins' little picture of pulmonary edema, and we're seeing red blood cells, we're seeing white blood cells, we're seeing the interstitial edema on the side there, and this alveolar or acinus is filled with fluid. And it can also cause alveolar collapse or atelectasis.
So is the fluid, is it mostly blood or is it everything?
It's a combination of what is able to leave the capillary.
Okay.
Typically proteins aren't in there because they're pretty big, but proteins can move over, but it's typically just the watery substance and cellular debris that moves over. So these are the anatomical alterations, and you'll want to be familiar with these. Interstitial edema, alveolar flooding, the surface tension is going to increase, and what's going to happen because of increased surface tension?
Collapse.
Alveolar collapse, okay? Alveolar shrinkage and atelectasis, and frothy white or pink secretions throughout the tracheobronchial tree. And it's kind of like a washing machine. Once that fluid gets up into the bronchioles and air's moving in and out, it is causing those bubbles to form, and they're just going to start continuing to rise up until some type of diuretic is given to get that fluid back out of the patient.
I have a question. I didn't maybe get into it, I don't know, but I've heard that hospitals are using BiPAP to help with pulmonary edema. How does that work? Does it just push it back through?
Well, there's controversy about that, but as long as there's been controversy, it's been continued to be utilized and probably works. So you can't just put them on BiPAP, you can't just put them on positive pressure ventilation, you can't just put them on CPAP and that move all the fluid. There has to be diuretics involved, there has to be some type of afterload reducer involved if it's heart related. And so what happens is along with the fluid being diuresed and getting back to the kidneys and being let out, the fluid with the positive pressure is moving at a faster rate back into the interstitial space and so forth for it to be let out. Now, there's controversy. Does that really happen? It probably does to some extent, but again, that's not the only thing that's going to rid. The fluid has to stop moving, or it's just going to continue, because we've got a lot of fluid in our bodies. So there's two types of pulmonary edema. There is cardiogenic, and just like it sounds, the heart is causing this or these events to take place. So this is a good time to review blood flow through the heart. Mary, let's start with you.
Right atrium.
Okay, so superior and inferior vena cava to the right atrium.
Oh, me. The tricuspid.
Tricuspid valve
To the right ventricle.
To the pulmonic valve.
to the pulmonic valve,
The pulmonary artery.
pulmonary artery, and to the pulmonary vasculature.
To the pulmonary trunk.
We were already past that.
Okay.
She's going back to the heart.
We're in the pulmonary vasculature.
No. I need to review mine. It's been a long time.
Okay, Laura.
The left atrium.
Okay, what before the left atrium?
You said the pulmonary vein.
Pulmonary veins. So oxygenated blood in the pulmonary veins goes to the left atrium. Left atrium.
The bicuspid valve.
Bicuspid valve. April.
Left ventricle.
Left ventricle. The aortic valve. And out to the body. So right here, the left ventricle is playing an extremely important role in getting blood out to the body. So when something happens to the left ventricle, that keeps that blood from moving forward like it's supposed to. What happens to the pressure in the capillaries, in the pulmonary capillaries? It increases. Now you've got a situation where there's an oncotic or an osmotic pressure that's outside the vessel. What's the main thing that's creating this outside pressure? What's the main substance? Proteins. That's really keeping that pressure kind of high. Now inside the capillary here, does anybody know what the pressure is normally inside the pulmonary capillaries?
It's like really low, like 20.
I'm not even going to say lower. It's like 7 to 10, maybe. We can go up. I'll go 10 to 15. And it varies depending on different things. But the point is that you're looking and saying, well, wait a minute. The oncotic pressure is a lot higher than the capillary pressure. Why doesn't anything from the interstitium move into the capillaries? There's a lot of other different things that keep that balance. So just trust me that as long as the outside of the vessel is around 25 to 30 and the inside of the vessel is around 10 to 15, fluid will stay where it's supposed to be. So when and I'm gonna so if the left heart is not able to pump out the blood that it's supposed to the left heart is going to become impaired itself because it's working so hard and it's going to use a lot more oxygen. But that blood is going to back up and it's going to cause the pressure in the pulmonary capillaries to do what? To increase. So now, once the pressure in the capillaries goes up to and instead of giving this a range, I'll just give it an actual pressure. So the oncotic pressure in this patient is 25 millimeters of mercury. Now the capillary pressure is 27 millimeters of mercury. It is higher than the pressure outside. And stuff, whether it's air or whether it's fluid, it's going to move from a higher pressure to a lower pressure. So what is going to happen to the water and different material that's in the capillaries? It's going to go out. It's going to move out. And the only place that it has to go